Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The Barcelona Grand Prix is next weekend, the track where Mercedes unveiled the W13 a couple of months ago, a very different car to what they are currently running with. Toto Wolff has not ruled out the possibility of returning to the sidepod design. Is it possible Mercedes ditch the sidepodless W13 as the season progresses? Very much intriguing your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, there's some Ferrari are still taken from their filming day that's been going on the last couple of days, I believe. People were saying they've kind of seen some flow vis maybe on the front wing here because they're trying to make some sort of changes to catch up to the Red Bull. Of course, it is allowed on these filming days. You get like 100 kilometers, I'm pretty sure, of running both days to pretty much test whatever new parts you want to, so it's not restricted in the way that other tests are. But yeah, they're going to have to do something about it if they want to catch up to Red Bull at least as of now. They believe they've got an upgrade. Actually, it seems to be the rear wing here. You can kind of see the greenery that might be indicating some flow vis paint. It's not really paint, but just to kind of see how the airflow is working over some of those new components that they might want to be bringing in. This also, just to look at, I thought was rather interesting just on F1 pace here. The comparison between the straight line speed in Miami of the back straight, the 1.2, 1.3 kilometer dead straight. And Verstappen had a lead pretty much all the way through, especially coming out of the corner, had a quite significant advantage in kind of early pickup speed, which is quite of interesting actually, because at the start of the year, that's where it seemed like the Ferrari was at its strongest, right? Coming out of the corners, it seemed to be really like a sprightly, to be honest, like had great acceleration. Seems like almost in this situation that the Red Bull was doing a better job, maybe due to the weight savings that they have had. Of course, this is taken on an average of 43 different laps, where there was no DRS in play. But I imagine most of these, like Leclerc was probably like not too far behind the DRS range, to which point he's probably still gaining something from the slipstream, and he would still gain quite something from the slipstream, even 1, 2, 3 seconds back even, there is still some benefit, right? So even though the fact that some of these numbers don't seem outrageously different really between Verstappen and Leclerc, even though Verstappen does have a higher top speed, these are probably on the lower side really of what Ferrari are, to be honest, looking at in terms of the advantage they have to overturn. Obviously they can overturn the advantage elsewhere on the lap, but speed is obviously a key factor at the end of the day. This is a big piece of news actually. The Formula E team of Mercedes is being sold to McLaren. Lots of talk about McLaren the last few days. Thought this was certainly worthy of note because they're now competing in pretty much everything, to be honest. So McLaren buying out their Formula E team. This is rather interesting just because the driver, of course, over there right now, Nick De Vries, and his potential move to Formula 1, whether that could potentially happen. These are all the now races or sports, I suppose, that McLaren are now competing in. They're in IndyCar. They're now going to be in Formula E for next season. That's pretty interesting stuff. But of course, one of their drivers, Nick De Vries, very strong Mercedes driver in Formula E, has kind of been tipped to potentially be joining one of the F1 teams, just because like the relationship with Mercedes, the relationship they have with Williams. There has been some discussion that if Latifi is gone, then Nick De Vries might be the one to take his spot. Now, apparently Latifi is not gone yet. Jos Capito actually comes out with this just a few minutes ago. We have contracts with both drivers, that being Albon and Latifi, and we respect them. Latifi was only slightly slower than Albon on Saturday. Latifi needs a little bit more time to get used to the car, but he has our full support. There were some rumours a few days ago that they're going to bin off Latifi mid-season, which probably would be a challenge from kind of a legal perspective anyway, and they probably don't really need to do it. But yeah, certainly he's been underperforming his teammates so far, Alex Albon. I'm pretty sure there's only 2 teams that one driver has the only driver on the team to secure points. Pretty sure, one of them of course is the Williams, and the other team I'm pretty sure is Haas, right, with Mick Schumacher failing to score points so far this year was Magnus and Haas. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Nick De Vries for Latifi, not seemingly a possibility at least this season, but next season is certainly another question mark entirely. There's also though from McLaren in Formula 1, as Seidel says right to it, was and still is a lot of work to further develop the car and bring upgrades to the next track. Now we look forward to seeing the results at the next races. So pretty much saying that yeah, they've got upgrades in the pipeline for Barcelona as well, and that is really the big discussion here I think about Mercedes. Like look, they're trying to upgrade their car, they're trying to make this version of their car work with the aero changes they're trying to bring it over this coming weekends. But if it doesn't work out for them in Barcelona, people have suggested the return to the original model of the car that they kind of presented in Barcelona right at the start of the season. And the only reason why I think they would probably do that is if they feel like their spot and the kind of risk they're taking with this current model is their spot is in jeopardy for third place in the constructors. Obviously they want to compete for number 1, number 2 with Ferrari and Red Bull, but if they're kind of comfortably third and every single race they're getting 5th and 6th, right, and there's no one really threatening them from behind, at least in terms of race pace, then why would they necessarily need to make a change if they know that the change back to the previous model is not going to allow them to compete with the top dogs anyway? So they might as well just give it a go with the current car. But if McLaren start to kind of close in on Mercedes and really push them, or other teams start to really push Mercedes, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, right, for that third placing constructors, and the new car proves to still be an absolute, a real nightmare for them, they might just say, look, let's cut our losses here, go back to the original version of the car and try to consolidate third place in the constructors at the very least, if they feel like they can't figure out the current version with the sidepodless design to compete for race wins at all. And that's kind of been the key point here. Like, technical director Mike Elliott said in the kind of the breakdown video the Mercedes do after each weekend, they're not really sure what exactly went wrong, as I will see his kind of discussion here in a second. Basically saying that, yeah, some conditions changed, they made some small tweaks to the car, but really the difference that they saw from free practice 2 on Friday through to, of course, well, the qualifying on Saturday, also, well, very surprising for them. We actually see right here, George Russell, of course, he went out in Q2 with a 130.1. Hamilton qualified 6th with a 129.6 in the end, but you can see the difference here between, let's just look at Charles Leclerc, for example, and Sergio Perez, two of the drivers that were here in, of course, FP2. Verstappen didn't really get to do any running in this session, but yeah, George Russell, you can see, he did a 129.9 to lead this session when the Mercedes was actually looking rather good. And you can see that the track over the course of the weekend improved to some degree. The drivers, of course, got more comfortable. The likes of Leclerc and Perez dropped pretty much a second each from their time from free practice 2 into qualifying. George Russell actually went slower, right? His car got slower, and Hamilton didn't really improve by all that much either compared to what you might expect as the track kind of warmed up through the weekend and the drivers got more comfortable. So, like, certainly their car went way off the pace on that Saturday, and it wasn't much better on the Sunday. So that's what they're trying to figure out here. And Total Wolff actually says there's effectively an easy route out of this if they want to. They can take a much less risky approach. They can pretty much just like firm up the flooring, see if that will obviously basically just give away some of the flexibility. I think it's probably going to make the car quicker than it is right now, as he says right here. Like, let's say we're not able to generate the downforce we want to, patch it up, make it stiffer, see where you end up in terms of performance. Reckoning that might actually help the car improve and is a relatively easy solution, but we don't want to go back to those simple solutions. We want to figure it out with this car as it is right now. If we can get it right with the downforce from the ground effect and the wings and not causing the porpoising, as they seem to have kind of got it right on the Friday in Miami for the first time this entire season, really. Certainly their most promising session of the entire year so far, but if anything, it was even more concerning for them. They couldn't replicate that over the coming days. So maybe it just shows this car is such a handful that even if they can somehow, get a hand on how to deal with it, it's not going to be easy to make work on a consistent basis, which might mean the return to the older version might actually make a little bit more sense. That's kind of what Toto sells right here in this article, that like, look, I wouldn't discount anything. People have said, look, do you want to go back to the launch spec, the original car at Barcelona they tried out last year? And that is the thing. If they come into this weekend with a zero-pod solution on the current car, and of course in simulations it's much faster. I think at the time it was said it was almost like a second a lap faster than the version actually with the side pods on. But if they come to the track here and they can't correlate that at all, and it's actually slower maybe than they were in a few months ago when they were doing testing it with the other version of the car, they might just decide, look, let's just pack it all in. Of course, they really do want to make sure they can understand what went wrong with this car. I think that's what kind of Toto goes on to say. Like, he's not ruling out the possibility of going back to that launch spec philosophy, but he wants to make sure before that point that they understand where this one went wrong. There's no kind of point at giving up on this concept if they don't really understand why it went wrong, why it's not a good idea, why they can't do it next year, for example, in a very similar manner. So I think that's kind of their priority. And while they have P3 and in the constructors and P5, P6 in every single race locked down and under really no threat from behind, I don't imagine they will change, because their only chance of competing with the best and competing for race wins this season seems to be, at least from their perspective, this design of the car that they believe has much more potential. And if they switch to the other one, it might be quicker than their current version that they're running with. Let's say this design, you guys can see this picture right here. So this is the current version of the car. Looks a bit more like a fighter jet here with their very small side pods on the left-hand side. Changes the aerodynamics rather significantly, and this was the version of the car unveiled in Barcelona with a kind of, much more conservative, traditional approach that other teams have gone for. Now, of course, this version on the right, they probably understand it a bit better, might well know what to expect from it, but feel like, okay, let's say that's half a second slower a lap than the Red Bull and the Ferrari. Okay, they get closer, but they're still not going to be able to win races or compete or anything like that. But the car on the left, they might be able to unlock something, as they did briefly on Friday in Miami. So I think it's going to be quite some time before they would make this call. As I say, if they're under real pressure from behind, then they might try and consolidate with something like this, but I feel like an awful lot is going to ride on this upcoming weekends, where we shall of course see whether any of the updates that they are trying here on this new version of the car actually work out. This of course was the old version here in Spain, where that you can see, a clear difference really between the Sidepod on this one, very more traditional conservative approach that we talked about at the time, and obviously what we have now, and you can barely see it at all, at least from the side angle. A couple of interesting things to mention as we close out the video. I'm not sure what Formula 1 are doing the kind of overtaking award this year, because I think the overtaking award had some issues in that, like, if you got past someone on the track, but then they let's say you outbraked someone or something and you got in front of them, that would kind of count as an overtake. But then if you went a little bit in too deep, they got back past you, that's now an overtake for them. So like the overtaking award last season was a bit strange. So this year what they've done, it seems, is they're doing positions gains. Is Albon actually topping the list with 27, Russell with 23, Ocon, Latifi actually at 15, not sure how he's managed that one, Lance Stroll and Zhou Guanyu. So yeah, interesting situation. I don't exactly know how they're counting this, to be honest, the positions gain, because if you gain it for a fraction of a second, then you rescind the position, then what does that really mean? I guess they're counting that anyway. Bit of a strange one, to be honest, but fair play to Alex Albon, of course. Great to see him back in a Formula 1 car this year, there is no doubt about it. This I thought was also interesting from F1 Stats Guru, lowest and highest DNF percentages in the hybrid era. So looking back really at the entire hybrid era, Caterham, of course, they only raced 33 times, and Mauricio Mano 108 times, guys, but most of these cars have raced at the vast majority of the races, and the DNF percentage is actually rather incredible for some of these teams. Like McLaren is remarkably high, Alfa Tauri right up here, the Alpine team, formerly Renault, Lotus of course, under the same heading, and most of the teams are in a relatively similar boat. Like even Red Bull, 17% of races, well, one of their cars DNFs, but I mean, look at Mercedes, right? This is honestly remarkable from Mercedes, kind of the consistency and performance from them, not just, partly that is the driver, right? So like Lewis Hamilton known to make very few mistakes throughout his career, not really doing anything that's going to put him in too much trouble. Like, of course, well, drivers do have impact on this to some degree, but also like it is the reliability of the car as well. The fact that they've only DNF'd like 7% of the races or 7% of their entries they've DNF'd is pretty remarkable compared to the next team above them is Ferrari at like 13%, right? So like quite impressive stuff. And of course, even so far this season, we see a relatively similar trends continuing onwards. And just this, speaking of Lewis Hamilton, on this day in Barcelona 2017, 55th win for Lewis Hamilton as it was at the time. Whether we can repeat that story, well, they can certainly need a miracle for what these aero upgrades might end up doing to their car. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.